George Kofensis. I guess we'll begin with Professor Reed.
Why not?
Okay.
That's fine.
Okay, hello. Thank you so much for being here, and for everyone who's been here 24/7, occupying both the square and the park, and all the hard work you've done. So I want to first start by saying why I think this is a truly inspiring historical moment. And I think it's inspiring for three reasons. First of all, for a lot of us who pay attention to the news and the world, we watched as occupations sprung up in Egypt, in Greece, in Spain, and activities in the UK and throughout the world, and we waited and wondered for a long time, when was it going to come here? And there was a lot to be cynical about America and Americans, and people said that the Americans are just too busy, on Facebook and watching television. They'll never do anything like this. They're just too passive. And so it's inspiring to see people taking to the streets and beginning to act and take charge of their future. That's one reason. The second reason is that this whole movement, the name Occupy Wall Street, of which Occupy Maine is a part, and there are occupies from Portland, Maine to Portland, Oregon, and probably beyond across the country and across the world. This movement is aimed at Wall Street, and that's somewhat unprecedented. I think people who've been around, and I've been around a little bit, have done marches to Washington or to Augusta, and we've addressed the centers of political power. We've tried to stop wars and done other sort of things. But it's the first time in my memory that there's been a march to Wall Street, to the center of capitalism, to the center of financial power, to a lot of the power that really, I think, we're beginning to realize controls a lot of our lives.
Yeah.
The second reason why this is inspirational. The third has to do with the actual work that's been happening here on Monument Square and in D.C. and in New York and throughout the country. And I'm talking about the actual work of the General Assemblies, of the direct democracy. I've been here a few times, participated in a few General Assemblies, and watched people have to struggle with a lot of really difficult problems. Problems with the police, problems with the surrounding businesses, people in the area, all kinds of potential conflict, and directly take charge of these things. And this is something that I actually think is completely being missed in a lot of the media coverage of this Occupy movement. You see people coming out now, New York Times, other publications, who are, some are critical and some are positive, some are saying, oh yes, this needs to happen, but these people need to formulate their demands, and these demands need to be taken up by politicians, and so forth. But I actually think that misses a lot of what's really happening here. This is not a matter of people making demands that politicians will listen to and respond to. This is about people engaging in direct democracy, taking charge of their lives, not waiting for a politician, because, face it, we wouldn't be in this situation if the politicians hadn't failed miserably. Or they continue to succeed for the 1%. They've succeeded quite fantastically for the 1%. But for the 99, not so much. Okay.
We got change in our pocket.
So that's the inspirational thing. Now I want to talk a little bit about why I wanted to have, because from the beginning I've been talking to Patrick and other people, Catherine, about trying to have a conversation, a teach-in perhaps, but to begin to have a conversation about why we're here and what we're doing. And I think that's really important. And I don't think it's the same as having demands. Demands presupposes that there's someone you think can listen to you and respond. And I don't think many people believe in that. But having an articulate sense of what you're doing is different than having demands. So, and the first thing I thought of, I don't know if you've seen this, there's this great image from New York. It's a guy holding up a sign that says, "Shit is fucked up and bullshit." That's what the sign says. And it's a great sign, and of course, I think it expresses how deep the frustration with the existing system goes. But of course, it's a great sign, but of course it's also the kind of sign that someone, if they wanted to, could point to and say, well, these people don't know what they're talking about. They can't even articulate their demands without putting in 2 swear words in their signs. But I still think that I think we need to acknowledge, and we need to start from that place, shit is fucked up and bullshit. And from there, begin to articulate what it is we're doing. So, first of all, why Wall Street? I mean, why pick this place, which is a place, there's an actual Wall Street, but it's also a symbol of a kind of economic system. And of course, the first and most obvious reason for this has to do with really what's happened over the past 3-4 years. I mean, the economic recession, TARP, the bailout, and that. But I actually think that we need to, in order to understand what's going on, we need to go. I mean, the basic level of fact is a bunch of people got bailed out. And now we're finding out that we have to pay for it in all sorts of ways. We're being told again and again, there's no money for education, there's no money for health care, there's no money for any... There's tons of money when it comes to banks being bailed out. There is no money for anything else. Which is why one of the very important slogans that have come out of this movement internationally is, we won't pay for your crisis.
Right.
We didn't profit from it when things are going well, and we're not paying for it now that it hasn't worked out for us. And another important point that comes out from this is this idea that there's socialism for the rich, but not for the rest of us. So there's socialization of risk, but not the socialization of benefits, right? When suddenly things go poorly, there's money to bail out banks and so on and so forth. And I think this is important to focus on this thing, because I think this hits at 2 stories we've been told all of our lives about capitalism and the way it works. The one story is this idea that there are these people. They're called capitalists. They have money, and they take risks with that money. They invest in all sorts of things. And the reason they make tons of money is because of the huge risk they've taken. Because they need a benefit that would match that risk. And we've learned that story isn't so much true. Because when they do fail, it turns out governments are there to bail them out. And the second story we've been told, again and again, and a much deeper, more profound story, is that capitalism has to do with a theory of human nature, right? A theory of human nature that basically we are all greedy bastards when it comes down to it. We are all looking out for our self-interest, and the only way you can expect anyone to do anything, to create anything, to invent anything, is for them to get tons of money afterwards, right? That's the only reason anyone would ever do anything, if the game was great. And there's a certain sense in which what's happened with Wall Street has poked a hole in that story as well, because the things that these people were inventing, they weren't cures for disease or technological devices to make our lives easier. They were techniques just to make money. Financial default swaps, etc. Fairly complicated techniques just to make money, right? So the idea that there's money to be made for inventing things is also, I think, sort of been thrown out the window. So that's 2 things from the immediate thing. But I also think we need to look, and I think it's the beginning of a conversation we need to have, begin to look backwards and ask ourselves, why do we have this massive concentration of wealth, this thing called financial capital, which is really money made off money made off debt from money, right? Which extends and deepens the divide between the rich and the poor. Because once you start making money off of having money, and the people who have money can only make more, and the people who have none can only become more and more impoverished. And we've watched as things which you might consider to be the basic needs of a human society, education, health, have become basis for debt. But they are things that we go in debt for. They are things that people become rich off of, and things that we go in debt for. And I think all of this stems back from, if you look at what's happened over the past, most people point to the beginning of the 1970s, where you had wages drop off for most working people in this country. and you've had massive increases in the pay of CEOs, and in that interim period you had this miraculous thing called debt. Consumer debt, household debt, and debt for a long time patched the gap between the wages people were making and the stuff they wanted to buy and the stuff the system needed to buy, right? Because as much as low wages are good for business, you have to have people buy your stuff. And for a long time the answer is we go in debt. We go in debt, put your house in debt, you go in debt again and again. Debt has been extended throughout society, and that debt to some extent extends the way in which people make money off of us, not just when we're working, when we're buying. People make money off of us in terms of going to school. That increases debt, that increases profits. Make money on us. Now, with what's happening with some of the banks, even accessing your money is a source of profit. They make money off of just having an account, looking at that account, using that account becomes a source of money. So it extends. Wall Street, and the reason why I think people are occupying Wall Street is Wall Street is here. It is in every bit of our lives. It is here when we go to school. It is here in our free time. I mean, think about how much money companies like Facebook and Google have become worth. And they become worth that because they utilize and monitor all the stuff we do in our free time. They monitor our time spent online. They observe that, and they translate that into their stock prices and so on. So Wall Street has come into every corner of our lives. Every corner of our lives has become a source of profit. So we occupy Wall Street because Wall Street has occupied all of our lives.